not a man of average height. He was very, very tall for a racing car. And in fact, I think that was probably his greatest disadvantage in Formula One cars. The Formula One cars are a completely different cockpit from an Indy car, for example, and almost any other car. Very tight, you're sitting in a fuel tank, there's really no space at all. And here was poor Dan, who was, like this much higher than I. I'm a man of average height.
That's what you like to say.
I fitted in pretty well. Jim Clark was the same height, Sterling Moss was the same height, and therefore Formula One cars were made for my kind of height. And poor Dan, of course, was a giant in comparison to us, in more ways than one, of course. But I don't think you Americans actually realize how much people love Dan Gurney around the world. I mean, he had an event at Goodwood only a couple of 3 years ago to honour his great career. The entire Goodwood crowd, which is one of the largest crowds we get for motorsports in the United Kingdom or Europe for that matter, were there to honour Dan Gurney, an American. Not a European, not a whop, an Italian, not a British driver.
I'm sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. He doesn't mean to be, what's the word?
You don't need to know the word. Dan Gurney was absolutely a giant in every respect. His manners, his way of speaking with people, his command of the English language. Keep in mind, his father was an opera singer, so he had a degree of class that a lot of us never had, and that showed through in Dan's career in the fullest possible way as a man. Everybody loved him. Dan drove for Jack Brabham, he drove for Colin Chapman, he drove for some of the best people, and I can't think of anybody who had a bad word to say about Dan. So when the Goodwood event was finished, and he was much touched by it, he was almost embarrassed because so many people had really given their heart to him. I brought him up with Eva that night, and he stayed in my house with Helen and I, and we had just 2 days of tremendous conversation and memory lane and everything else, and politics. He wasn't shy about politics. And America would be considerably better off if it had been Dan Gurney who had become president. But really, it's a fact. If a money man can become president, why can't a racing driver become president? So really, I know you've paid great tribute, all of you, and respect to Dan Gurney, but as a foreigner, him coming over to Europe, where the Europeans were expected, the Italians were expected to do well, even the French were expected to do well, and the British were there. Dan Gurney was always much, much appreciated. The worst photograph I think there is in motor racing is with Dan Gurney trying to sit inside the Porsche Formula One car at Rouen. He was timed way up here and the racing car was way down here, and what he must have been doing with his feet and his legs, that took courage. So my memories of Dan are very deep, very loving, and he just was a great man, and I'm really happy that in my period of being a racing driver, Dan Gurney was there.
Yep.